So I've heard a few people say that in the past people either didn't care about female orgasms or that they were recently discovered. Of course the people were joking, but I think it would be quite interesting to know that this is just not true. In fact, a lot of scientists, ancient and medieval scientists, recommended what we would today call foreplay. For instance, if you look at some medieval and ancient writers, like Galen for instance, they said that both sperms were required, the hot sperm of a man and the cold sperm of a female, in order to result in pregnancy. And although some people challenged this view, this was the traditional view for centuries. And there are some other strange misconceptions about people's beliefs about sex in the past. For instance, I think a lot of people think people in the past always held the woman responsible for the gender of the baby, but this again just isn't true. Keeping with Galen, for instance, he believed that the gender of a baby was the result of a man's masculinity. If he had a boy who looked like him, it was a sign that the man was very masculine. But if he had a daughter who looked like the mother, it was a sign that he was a pretty feminine man, because his sperm had sort of been outplayed by the female sperm. And when I say female sperm, this is the term that they kept on using. They believed both genders had a sperm. But this was a time when having children, and particularly males, was very important. And there's some wonderful tips and tricks that they suggested. For instance, in the 1st century AD, a Greek physicist named Rufus said that you should never have sex before your meal is digested, because this would result in a baby with mental problems. But probably the most important factor that ancient and medieval writers kept citing was temperature. They believed that dry and cold testicles were bad, and warm and moist testicles were good in producing boys, and this is why a lot of pubic hair was not only desirable but also the sign of a masculine man, essentially. An unknown English writer in the 13th century, for instance, lists 4 types of men. Everything from the melancholic, they were men who desired little and could do little in bed, and the sanguine, who wanted a lot and could do a lot. And he believed that what sort of man the person would become was very much dependent on the temperature of the testicles when conceived. And the temperature also affected other things. Well, they believed that they thought this would also influence when a boy would go through puberty. But when some couples couldn't conceive a child, this was grounds for an annulment of the marriage. But some men who were unhappy with their marriage would sometimes fake impotency. The government, well, the authorities, were aware that some men faked it, so they did have tests. And in the 14th century, a French writer named Guy de Chauliac, I'm probably saying that wrong, but he records these tests, and pretty much what they would do is warm up the testicles and see if that helps. I know this video is a bit here, there, and everywhere, but to summarize, in the ancient and medieval world, people believed in order to conceive a child, if witches weren't involved, because a lot of people believed witches would make people impotent, but if witches weren't involved, people believed that the perfect way to conceive a boy in particular was to first of all make the woman have an orgasm, and secondly the man must have warm, moist testicles.